Hello again, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lachlan Pollock, and I work for the Institute of Community Directors Australia, which educates and informs not-for-profits across Australia. I'll be hosting this webcast for today. I'd like to kick things off by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that I am on, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I'd also like to extend this respect to the traditional owners of the lands from which our audience are joining us from for today, wherever that may be. Now it's time to introduce you to the hosts of the Not-for-Profit Agenda, the senior members of ICDA's media team, Community Directors Intelligence Editor Matthew Schulz, and Community Advocate Editor Greg Thom. Matt and Greg, over to you. Sorry, everyone, just bear with me for 1 second. Matt, you're still on mute there. I just need to quickly adjust a setting. And you're good to go.
Thanks, Lockie. Anyway, I'm Matthew Schulz.
I'm Greg Thom.
Well, thanks, Lockie, for that intro, and thanks to everyone for joining us on our quarterly newscast. Happy Halloween! There's a few people in the office dressed up today. Some people thought that I'd come dressed as Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. Anyway, we're not trying to scare you off. Instead, the Not-for-Profit Agenda is part of the ICDA mission to get you across important not-for-profit issues in less time than you have your lunch. This edition is all about campaigns, which most organisations do, and some of them constantly. So look, tell us on the chat where you're from, including the Indigenous land you're hailing from. Give us a snap summary of what you do or your organisation does. And if you're running a campaign now, drop that into the chat too. We won't be offended if you use the chat to connect with some other people here.
Totally.
Talking of connecting, we'd love you to keep your cameras on, at least at the start, unless you're chewing on a sandwich, having a nap, or going to the toilet. It has happened,
It does
right?
happen, yeah.
A reminder that only those appearing on camera are recorded, so don't be too worried about leaving your camera on. This also gives distracted people a chance to snoop at your bookshelf, check your collectibles, consider your Zoom background, and any facial modifications you might have made. And if that's not enough to stop you drifting off, we'll send this recording and slides with links to most of the stuff we're talking about today. So Hippie, tell us what's on the show.
Yes, well, as Max said, welcome everyone. Great to be here again. Today we'll be speaking with Shadow Charities Minister Senator Dean Smith. Obviously we're not biased since we had Charities Minister Andrew Leigh on last time, which was a fantastic discussion, and I'm sure Senator will be equally up to the task. If you already have a burning question for Senator Smith, add that to the chat now, or see what he says in the interview, as he'll be taking a few questions from the floor. Please keep your questions tight and topical, and we'll try to give you the chance to ask them in person. If you like other people's questions, alert us with a thumbs up or another emoji. After the Senator, we'll hear from those sector leaders, government relations guru Angus Crowther, voice campaigner Thomas Mayo, straight-talking NFP media expert Brett DeHoot, gambling reform advocate Martin Thomas, young philanthropist Brianna Kerr, the Australian Democracy Network Sathran Zoma, Lisa Allen, architect of the Pay What It Takes campaign, and Ian Bird of Community Foundations of Australia. We've also slotted in some other campaigns we liked and include some resources to help with your own campaigns. Start thinking about what you'd like to see come out of the 2025 federal election, because we've got a snap poll on that too. Deep breath.
Well, that is a lot. That is a lot to get through, but in case you're keeping up, you'll be interested to know that much of the talent today feature in this month's campaigns edition of Community Directors Intelligence. There's going to be a replay of this, and we'll send out those links as well. I would like to, while we've got you, issue a special welcome to all the ICDA members out there, members of the Community Directors Council, all the chairs, directors and managers out there, some of the past and future guests on the show. We see you out there, all the peak bodies from different states and territories, and people from every kind of social service, aid, advocacy, social enterprise, arts funding, fundraising, etc., so many. Anyway, look, that brings us to the main event, Hippie.
Yes, since we're talking about campaigns, who better to talk about them than Senator Dean Smith? He's fresh from chairing a hearing of the Australian Tax Office's handling of the new NFP tax returns, which I know will be close to a lot of people's heart, and helping not-for-profits win exemptions to new workplace laws. Senator Smith is a West Australian based and was appointed Shadow for Charities in June 2022. The sector will have noticed a different approach to the sector from a former coalition government by Senator Smith, who's done his homework, spending a great deal of time traversing the country, listening to the concerns of charities, not-for-profits and community groups, and working with not-for-profits across the country. So welcome, Senator Smith, if you're on the line, hopefully. We'll just give the Senator a second. Hopefully he's been able to join.
There we go. You'd think with a 3-hour time delay, I'd be well and truly organised, but there we go.
That's right. We should. I should have noted that it's a constant that the Senator has to deal with the difference between the East Coast and the West Coast, which he does with aplomb. Welcome, Senator. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Great to be with you both. Thanks for having me on.
We'll start. We've got a lot of questions lined up for you, and I'm sure there will be some from the floor. But could I just start by asking, were you surprised at the level of frustration expressed by sector representatives who attended the public Senate hearing into the ADO self-review changes? And perhaps can you give me some headline recommendations that might be contained in the report? He says with a smile.
Yeah, well, revealing to you a day before the report is actually released, the recommendations is the surest way to get myself sacked as a senator for Western Australia. So I do enjoy the job very much. So you won't be surprised that I'm just going to ask you to wait 24 hours. But I don't expect anyone will be surprised by what I would characterize as highly practical initiatives that the sector has been talking about for a very, very long time. I'm not sure why previous suggestions about how the implementation can be better calibrated so that it doesn't provide a burden for not-for-profits. You know, that's part of the historical conversation. I'm very much focused on the here and now, but I'd say a couple of things. Doesn't matter if you're a community organisation or a parliamentarian like myself, there's nothing more frustrating than not getting your voice heard, particularly when you think the points that you're making or the arguments that you are making are reasonable. What surprised me about this issue is that the not-for-profit sector had been talking about this for a long period before I even raised it in the Senate estimates some time ago. Then I raised it in the Senate estimates, and I, perhaps naively, which is a big statement for someone who's been in the role for over 10 years, but perhaps naively, I thought the undertakings that were given to me by the ATO, Deputy Commissioner, would be followed through. They were pretty simple undertakings. Greater visibility about the extension to the deadline, greater visibility of the phone number, making sure that when officials from the tax office were responding to queries, they were suitably informed and prepared. None of that happened. So then I had a private briefing. Then I invited the ATO and the ACNC to come and speak to Coalition MPs and their staff, because Coalition MPs were receiving many inquiries from the not-for-profit sector. And again, I thought my requests or pleas were very reasonable. They weren't acted on. And then I thought, well, we'll take it to the next level, and that is a Senate committee process, a Senate committee inquiry. And you know, the ATO should consider that as a serious black mark against them, that the matter had to get escalated to that level. So, and of course, the context of this is very, very important. Not-for-profits are doing the best they can. They're a critical part of, you know, what we refer to as our civil society. The set of circumstances in which they are operating at the moment are more challenging by any sort of fair assessment. We want to retain volunteers. Getting volunteers is harder. The demands on not-for-profits is greater and greater. And at a time when we are a little bit nervous about where the direction of our country is heading, we're a little bit nervous about where the direction of our world might be heading, we know that people will go to their communities first to be reassured. So I would like to be able to see the not-for-profit sector as unencumbered by distractions as possible. So now, but in the interest of total fairness, this was a coalition initiative. We are talking about the implementation of that, but I do think I am curious that some of these issues perhaps weren't thought about more carefully in that implementation phase. But the beauty of the role that I have, being a senator, and I often say to people, and I think we've reflected on this, Greg, I don't remember this particular role being held by a senator previously. So that just means that I've got different set of tools available to me to advocate on behalf of the not-for-profit sector. A committee inquiry process, a Senate estimates process, what we call the order for the production of documents. So to answer your question, hugely frustrated. I was starting to feel frustrated in addition to the frustration that was being conveyed to me by the sector. And now the committee report will apply additional pressure to the ATO. How the government and the ATO then seek to respond to this. The idea that the 31st of March deadline is some great concession is foolish. People should go to their summer holidays, being able to enjoy the summer holidays, not having their holiday experience, preoccupied in the back of their mind by this 31 March reporting obligation. And it's not a revenue measure, it's an integrity measure. But again, that reporting date, I think, can be extended further. But anyway, the report tomorrow will be a clear indication of where I think we need to be going. And I've not yet seen how the government will choose to respond to that, but we'll see. But it's not a matter that I consider finished. Yep.
Thank you. We'll look forward to diving into the report when it's actually released, and you can speak a bit more fully about some of the findings and recommendations in there. Turning to another issue, the fixed term contracting. So is it a win for the sector, with the government agreeing to amend its workplace legislation, which is describe that as a classic case of an effective campaign to achieve a common objective? We're talking about campaigns as part of today's not-for-profit agenda, and that's one that you can look at as a classic case of that.
I think there's a couple of elements to this issue which are important. One, again, and perhaps the sector going forward might like to advocate that the next minister, whether that be Labor or Coalition, the next opposition spokesman, whether that be Liberal or Coalition or Labor, come from the Senate. The Senate has a greater set of tools through which to advocate for the sector and advocate successfully. So again, the fixed term contracting matter was something that I had been aware of. It was being raised in various meetings that I was having around the country. And in this business, in our business, it's important to separate anecdote from data or evidence. So I was hearing stories, but it was only when David Crosby and others from the sector approached me more formally about the issue that I thought, okay, they were able to demonstrate to me that they'd made many representations to the government, but the government, for whatever reason, was deaf to their concerns. We talked the issue through because it was very, very important that even in the sector, there were people that had the problem was experienced in a very similar way by everyone, but people had different perspectives in terms of what the resolution looked like. And it was very, very important for me to make sure that there was a sector-wide position. Then, using tools of the Senate, rather a simple technique, the order for the production of documents, I go into the Senate and I say, I would like to see all of these documents, just to see, what level of attention and effort the government was putting on this particular issue. In a flash, Murray Watts office calls, "Oh, Senator Smith, don't do this. This will tie up the resources." I said, "Well, Senator Watts' office, you're free to jump onto your feet. You can give the sector a commitment this afternoon that it'll be resolved in a certain way by a certain time frame. And then, and only after then, will I withdraw the order for the production of documents." So the order sat there as a bit of a sort of keep them honest technique. Anyway, long story short, we got to the right conclusion. And I think we got to the right conclusion because it's very, very clear now the sector has a higher degree of confidence about the application of this. Secondly, it did have to be worked through between the sector and the government and the Fair Work Commission. That was done. So I do, now of course there was a completely different way this could have been done. A politician could have got on a platform and just talked about the problem, but not offered up a pathway in terms of how to bring this to a more meaningful discussion, and then bring it to a resolution. Now, for my part, I think it does demonstrate that the government was not listening closely enough to what was being told to it. First point. Secondly, I think it does demonstrate, the power and the effectiveness of the Senate, but how, someone like me, who prior to being appointed to this role would have been, unknown to many people across the sector. People might have come with their preconceived ideas. Oh, this Liberal senator, so it was an important opportunity. I saw it as an important opportunity to demonstrate to the sector that getting practical outcomes that are meaningful and in a timely way is what is really important at the moment. There's always be a place for the politics. That's why we have election campaign periods, all these sorts of things. But I think given the urgency of the issue for people and the very, very real concerns that sector participants were raising with me, I think it's a great outcome. I think it's a good outcome, and I'm happy to have approached it the way that I chose to approach it.
Well, Senator, thank you for that answer. Talking about the campaigns that are coming up, I mean, the federal election's only as little as 6 months away, and obviously there's a lot of people on this call who will want to push their case for a better deal. What are some of the ways that sector organisations could lobby you or their local MP or senators to get that better deal and build that relationship? Is it too late, or can they still get some traction there?
Well, it's never too late. It's never too late. It's never too late in anything for life, I believe. I would make a couple of observations. There will be those that love election campaigns because they love the politics, they love the political fight, they love to see column inches in newspapers. And look, good luck to those people. They might think there's a place for that. My personal view at the moment is the issues are significant enough that they do require some earnestness on the part of parliamentarians like myself. I think it's important in everything that a parliamentarian does or responds to, and everything that stakeholders do, should always be about building confidence and building hope. So yes, people will want to come and say, this is our particular challenge and this is our particular solution. But I think my observation is it's always better for these things to be couched in the positive term rather than in the negative term. The other thing I think is important to be very, very alert to, when we have very real, obvious, well-documented situations of charities having to demand to a whole set of circumstances that they've not seen before or they've not seen for such a long time. And then sector participants come and say, oh, well, this is our issue. These are our issues. And those issues seem at odds or a different level of priority to what are these real grassroots issues. I think you've got to be very, very careful about that. So, there had been a situation where people came to me with their list of demands. And I thought, wow, okay, great. In a perfect world, these list of demands would appear quite reasonable. But in an environment where the sector is dealing with, cost of running charities, cost of doing business, cost of providing charitable care, these sorts of things start to look a little bit indulgent. So I think making sure that the requests, the perspectives are well suited to the context in which the parliamentarian is operating and the parliamentarian has to make decisions for. So I would just, and then the other, and approach every parliamentarian with an open mind. It doesn't matter who they are. The great bulk of parliamentarians are interested in building community. They are interested in supporting their communities. They want to be engaged with their communities. They like the idea of being able to get success for their local communities. So approach them with open arms and an open heart. Leave the preconceived ideas at the door, and I think that might deliver a better and more positive results. I like to think, just using, myself as an example in this particular situation, I like to think that I might have, at least challenged, if not changed, some of the preconceived ideas that people might have had about how a coalition senator, yes, I've been around for a little while, yes, I'm experienced, yes, I've prosecuted some very, very big issues in our national parliament and been successful. I like to think that people, at a minimum, approach me with a more open mind than they might have 2.5 years ago.
Well, that's great advice. Thank you very much, Senator. Look, talking about what the asks might be, we actually do have a snap poll.
Right. A snap poll.
In which we ask.
You won't be surprised if I ask you for the sample size.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, we can see that's everyone here.
Yeah.
So I think Lockie's got that available. He can launch that at some point. Anyway, the thing about the poll is that we'll throw it up, and then we'll give you plenty of time to answer it. And one thing I would say is the easiest way to get it away from your screen is to answer the question, and then it will go away. So that's trying to increase our sample size there, Senator Smith. And look, while we're waiting for anyone to drop another question in, the chat, we've got plenty, don't worry. One of the things we're really keen to know about is you've been keeping watch of those there's three major inquiries affecting the sector. There's the Productivity Commission review into philanthropy, the not-for-profit sector blueprint, the Department of Social Security's review of funding. Do you have any further information about how that's tracking? Are we waiting too long for all these things to start to drop? And do you think that these things will actually improve the situation for not-for-profits?
Okay, well, I've got to applaud the not-for-profit sector, because you've demonstrated great patience, tremendous patience. I would have thought that, having come out of a pandemic experience with very real economic challenges that are being, felt across the community, in people's families, in community organisations, I would have thought the government would have acted with much greater haste around all of these things. However the government chooses to respond to the Productivity Commission, it will not be legislated in this Parliament. Wow. It probably will not be legislated in the first 2 years of the next Parliament. That's not progress. That's not reform. I've watched very closely, and I've read many of the submissions around the sector blueprint. I do think that it's a necessary initiative, because the environment in which we operate, the context in which we operate, is always changing. And I do think that things are perhaps changing at a pace that we've not necessarily experience before, and that's not necessarily bad. That's not necessarily bad, but the process seems to be very slow. And I would add to that if you read closely the submissions, some people are saying, why are we talking about the same things we've always been talking about? Why can't we just have some leadership? Political leaders take a bit of a risk and say, okay, I've heard of all this, I've read all this, this is the direction, these are the priorities, and we'll come back in 12 months, we'll come back in 3 years, and we'll recalibrate. The idea of review sort of suggests, we've got to turn everything up on its, we've got to have some massive revolution. I actually think that paying close attention to those things that are working well, recalibrating them so that they can work more effectively. I just think things have taken too long. The sector has been very patient. And in 6 months, so in March next year or in May next year, the sector will be able to say, we're happy with the progress that's been made, or we're looking for something better. And that might mean the sector says, well, you know what? We enjoy good relationships with everyone, but we're going to give someone else a go. It has taken way too long. I'm an impatient person. I like to get things through. I'm a senator with 4 staff. I get no additional resources. A private senator's bill, which is before the Senate, on tax incentives for donations. A parliamentary inquiry is about to report that gives expression to what the not-for-profit sector has been saying. Resolution of the contracting matter. It might be dangerous. I know what you might be thinking. Oh, it might be dangerous if we make him a minister. But things have taken too long, and the need is real and it's urgent. And I would approach it with more leadership and less process.
Thanks, Senator. Unfortunately, the time is flying. I know your time is valuable. I can't believe how quickly it's gone past listening to great insights. But so we've got time for one final question. Unfortunately, we don't have time for audience questions. I know your time is limited. But what would a coalition government do differently for the sector if elected in 2025? Are you, as a coalition, against the work of advocacy groups, such as those you're politically opposed to? Not so much you personally, but the government. You said it's changed from the previous iteration approach to charities, but what would you say you would do differently if elected at the next election?
Well, full marks, Greg and Matthew. You tried to get me to reveal the recommendations of a Senate report the day before. I'd lose my job in the Senate, and Peter Dutton would give me the flick. I can say this at this particular point in time. I think there's a case for what I would call transformative change in the philanthropic giving space. I think that transformative opportunity has not been captured in the Productivity Commission report, unfortunately. So I'd say that. Secondly, I think the sector does deserve much greater responsiveness to the issues that they bring to political decision makers. They can expect a coalition government to be highly responsive to their issues. And I can say that with great confidence. ATO implementation of the not-for-profit requirement, resolution of the contracting issue, and bringing forward a solution to better support food charities, but also others in the economy who benefit from that. So a coalition government would be more responsive. Now, for those in the sector who politically or philosophically, find themselves or have found themselves disengaged or not with a genuine opportunity to engage, I think they can be very, very confident that given my track record in this role, but also in the Parliament more generally, that I will approach all of their issues with fairness and with an open mind, and with a high level of sort of honesty and and openness in those discussions. We won't always necessarily agree. There will be different priorities, absolutely, but they'll always get a very, very clear and honest perspective from me about where the coalition's approach and priorities will be. Yeah.
Thanks, Senator.
More to come.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, in the future, not now.
Well, sorry. Thanks again, Senator, for your time, which has been great, providing some of those valuable insights into the state of the sector. Look, if you can, I know you've got matters of state awaiting you, but if you can stay online and hear about some of the great campaigns and some of the insights from the other guests and interviews that we've done, you're welcome to.
Yeah. What was the survey outcomes? Are you able to share those yet? Or
Yes, and in fact, yes. Now that you've asked, we can do that. So there you go. So the top hit is a reduction in red tape, which is probably not a massive surprise, but also some of the things you've already flagged, improvements to the way that governments work with not-for-profits. Yes. So there's
Sustainable funding.
Sustainable funding.
Yeah, can I just comment on a couple of those, right?
Yes.
So in the fourth one, improvements to the way governments work. This, even though we're going through the blueprint process, this was still the most powerful point or comment that people kept making. So when I look at this, when I see improvements to the way governments work with NFPs, you know what I see and hear in that? I think what I see more openness, right? I see greater level of responsiveness, and I also a bit of leadership. Okay, these issues are this suite of issues. A political leader can say, yes, I think these issues are broadly agreed. So let's not recanvass those issues, but let's have a look at this set of issues that are perhaps not yet broadly agreed, or might be a little bit more contested amongst the sector. So let's put our energy here. Now, I'm often confused about whether it's a virtue or a curse, but I am a bit of a micromanager. I do like to get into the detail of issues, and I spend my time reading reports, trying to sort of get into the sort of the headspace. So, and some sector participants may not like this, but if the government was to change, they would have a highly engaged, responsible minister who will, not just show a real interest, but will interrogate issues on their behalf. So I think you can expect a more robust conversation, exchange of ideas, and I just make this point, Greg and Matthew. In my political career thus far, I have taken real risks for people. I am not a status quo politician. So that is an approach that I would be bringing to the sector and to advocate on their behalf. This is the other point. The minister's responsibility is to advocate for the sector in the government, and I think that's been missing. Anyway.
Fantastic, and thank you for sharing your time and those valuable insights. And we'll see where we are in 6 months' time, and as to whether you can put those promises into practice. We'll let the electoral process.
Well, again, last point, guys. You don't only have to be in government to make things happen. You can actually be in opposition.
Oh, you've proved
and make things happen. Yep.
Yeah, and prove that with some of the outcomes from some of the things that we've talked about today. So congratulations on that and that good work. As I say, feel free to stick around if you've got time to listen to the rest of our program. But I
might listen for another 7 minutes, and then I've just got to get in my car and go to the northern suburbs, or the more northern suburbs than where my office is at the moment in Perth. Yep.
No worries. Thank you, Senator. So to set the scene for our campaigns, which is the theme of this edition of Not-for-Profit Agenda, we thought we'd start with an expert in helping not-for-profits work with government decision makers. Angus Crowther a co-founder of Tank, says that leaders can create a bigger impact with the right strategy and tactics. Let's hear from Angus.
Certainly, campaigning in this space is essential because there is a lot of competition across sectors is kind of the first thing. But it also often takes time to help decision makers understand your value proposition and your solution. And that doesn't happen super quickly often, regrettably. And so thinking of these things in terms of effective campaigning and getting started early before elections and even budgets is really, really important because of that competition and because of the need to build that sort of awareness and understanding, but also because outcomes in government are delivered on the basis of relationships quite often. Yes, evidence and efficacy is important, of course, but when you're looking at things that require political will and political decision-making, that takes time, and that's why campaigning is important. The first one is starting as early as you're able to. I think, yesterday was the best day, today is the next best, and so on. But it's really then about looking at, well, what are our objectives and beginning to quantify those, so using a smart planning kind of formula or something like that is perfectly fine. And then building out the strategy around the objectives as well. And I think in particular, some of the tactics around this stuff that are really important. I remember, a couple of rules, all politics is local. So it's really important to think about what is the local connection that we have to the community, and not-for-profits often have this in abundance, which is great news, because that's of interest to politicians. And then also borrowing from the adage of all politics is about numbers. And so it's really about trying to measure your impact by numbers. How many constituents do we engage with? How many people have we supported? How many people have we placed in a program, so on and so forth. You can even look at things like your donor data to try and give an indicator of levels of support within a community and then conveying that back to an MP. And then I think the other one is around looking at what are the touch points that you could have with a politician too. So it's not just talking at them, it's interacting with them as well. And so it's looking at calendar and event mapping from our perspective and identifying what are those things that you're doing internally that an MP would be interested in, or what are those external, international or national days of X issue where you can engage around that as well. So there's some of the key things that I think about when I'm thinking about engagement ahead of budgets and elections.
Apologies for technical issues again. That's part of the fun part. Matt and I love doing live webinars like this. We throw a couple of hand grenades in there just to make it interesting. But some great food for thought there from Angus on how to effectively engage with government. Yeah.
Now, look, the next one, we've got many people in our sector, including us, were hopeful that the Voice referendum would be a success this time last year. But the push for the First Nations Voice Treaty Truth campaign is not going away. Ask Lydia Thorpe. We could have a whole episode on that. We won't. Heirs versus Hares. Perhaps we wrote about it in this week's Community Advocate. We've got a comment there. But look, one prominent Indigenous voice is Thomas Mayo, who's a leading advocate in favour of the Voice, signatory to the Uluru Statement from the Heart. He took that message around the country. He's written a new book about this. Anyway, this is what he has to say about how Yes campaigners can stand up again.
We created a very solid movement, more solid than it's ever been. 40% of people certain that they want change. So wear those shirts again, write something else on them or something like that, my sister made some shirts that said, I love fishing, and I voted yes, I tell bad dad jokes and I voted yes, these sorts of things, always will be yes, always was, always will be yes. These just, as I mentioned, people that voted no, many of them didn't vote no with malice in their hearts. They voted no because they're busy and because they're confused. And someone like Peter Dutton, who, aspires to leadership in this country, basically misinformed them and confused them. So wear those shirts, continue to fly the flag, and that creates conversations. And then when you have the conversations, resist polarisation, have patience, listen to people, understand where their misconceptions are coming from, and then you'll know what evidence to give them to help them on. You might even give them a copy of the book.
Look, and talking about his book, we actually have an exclusive chapter extract from his book in the most recent edition of Community Directors Intelligence. We'll have all the links in the slides. So look, next we've got one of my favourite media commentators, Brett DeHoot. He's a former TV producer and journo turned not-for-profit media and marketing whisperer, whose number one campaigning rule is playing to win. And here's why.
A campaign should be multifactorial. So it could be just advertising, and advertisers love to say everything's a campaign. Oh wow, you got an ad on TV and you got some Facebook advertising or whatever. But are you doing public events? Are you writing and publishing opinion pieces? Are you establishing entire think tanks devoted to this issue? Are you lobbying politicians? Are you activating your members? I did a campaign for the aged care sector, trying to recruit. And we gathered all of the people around this boardroom table of all the major aged care providers. She runs $1 billion company, he runs a $2 billion company, or they're only worth 800 million. They employ 1,300 staff. And we devised a campaign aimed at recruiting people. And the idea, of course, was to do more than just put an ad in the paper or seek some free media coverage about it. It was to activate all those individual organizations to fuel the campaign, to drive it through all the channels and avenues they have. And typically, of course, some did get behind it and assisted the campaign. Others, for various reasons, did not. And the awful truth of campaigning is most campaigns do not succeed, and nor did that one. I talk about the John Farnham rule, playing to win. When he joined Little River Band, it was their first single, synthesizer heavy, played over many sporting montages. But it's true. I am engaged and sometimes paid by clients to campaign on something, but I very quickly realize they're not playing to win. They're playing to raise awareness. They're playing to tick a box. They're playing to placate a stakeholder. If you are to win a campaign, you have to go 100% from the start to the end. So whatever resources you can muster, you cancel your 4 o'clocks, you go a little easy on the annual report, you don't worry about the monthly newsletter, and you campaign, probably doing things you haven't normally done, calling in favors, getting board members involved. It will be different for different people. But campaigns naturally are trying to change something, very difficult. So the likelihood of that happening without a big 100% push is unlikely. So, and also, who wants to work on a campaign that's not playing to win? How boring.
You tell us, Brett, what you really think. Anyway, he also appears in the Community Directors Intelligence, talking about how not-for-profits really have to burst their bubbles, their elite bubbles, and he actually blames that partly for the failure of the Voice campaign. As he says, campaigns are not guaranteed to win, but we do have to learn from them. I mean, take, for instance, this month, child poverty media launch at Adelaide Oval. 10 CEOs turned up from top community organisations, but not a single journo rocked up. And for a whole variety of reasons, including an abortion debate in Parliament there. But look, that failure is generating its own attention. SACOS chief Ross Wamsley says that the groups there will rethink how they work with the visuals, how they work the talent, trying to get people with lived experience more. And look, perhaps, what about a successful campaign? Let's talk about this next one.
Yes, from the, there's a lot of effort goes into these campaigns, but talking about bubble bursting, Equality Australia and LGBTQI advocates ran this super swift campaign that forced a government backflip on a key question in the census on sexual preference, which you'll no doubt remember. Here they are speaking on Ten's The Project, arguing for the change.
Just makes sense to me that we would want to find out, finally, just how many people in Australia are actually straight.
But this week, they backflipped.
We don't want to open up a divisive debate in relation to this issue. The last thing we want to do is inflict that debate on a sector of our community right now.
The Sex Discrimination Commissioner today joining a chorus of voices calling on the government to reverse the controversial call as the backlash mounts.
I think we should reconsider the decision to formulate the questions in the next census. We should include people and we should include the LGBTIQ community.
While it's estimated to be 11%, the true number of LGBTQI Australians is unknown.
Unless we're counted, the government is blind when it comes to making decisions about the programs and funding that it dedicates to meeting the needs of our communities.
And if you'd like to know more about that issue, you can read our coverage in the Community Directors Intelligence Campaign Edition, which fleshes out a little bit more about that campaign and what it achieved. Another campaign case study comes from the Alliance for Gambling Reform. It's been hard to miss their push to end gambling advertising. I spoke with the Alliance's CEO, Martin Thomas, about some of the tactics that have worked for them.
What we've found is, particularly on gambling advertising, there is such overkill now in the number of ads that are on our screens. ACMA did a assessment of this and found that there's more than 1 million ads in any one year. That's just pissed people off, basically. Whether they were for or against gambling, it has really changed the mood. So our campaign's worked at a number of levels. One is trying to demonstrate public support. So we've done a online petition, which I think we had something like 35 to 40,000 people sign, which was extraordinary. We've also had campaigns where people can go online and write to their local MP and talk about the importance of implementing the Murphy report. We have, from a public point of view, we've also done very specific targeted campaigns in a number of key electorates, particularly more recently around the NRL Grand Final and the AFL Grand Final. People in those electorates would have received a text as they were about to watch the Grand Final saying something to words to the effect that we all love football, but we don't love football ads, and let's hope we can ban them for the next Grand Final. We also have done extensive online campaigns with Facebook and others that have been really powerful. And finally, we had the luxury, I guess, of a major donor who gave us, in one instance, $50,000 to fund full newspaper ads. And this was quite a game changer for us. So we had a full-page newspaper ad in which we did an open letter to the Prime Minister and the opposition leader. It was in the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age and the Fin Review. And we got prominent Australians, and John Howard, Lucy Turnbull, we had Rosie Batty, Craig Foster, and that seemed to have tipped, I think, put it on the political agenda much more than it was previously. So they were some of the things from a campaigning and a tactics point of view that proved extraordinarily successful.
Great insights there from Martin on identifying the problem, crafting a strategy, and then implementing execution.
Now, look, taking a bit of a different tack is the $5 founder, Brianna Kerr. She's a young philanthropist based here at our community house. I spoke to her about her big ambitions with her grassroots efforts getting noticed by influential philanthropists and the Charities Minister.
In July this year, I launched a giving community called $5, and the premise is all in the name. It relies on members chipping in $5 a week to a pool, and on an annual basis, we grant out to organisations working across climate, education and living standards. We recently ran some pool parties, what we're calling them, where people gather physically and meet, which has just been, a great space to build community, really, and come together and, be in a space where we have that shared affinity and we get to talk about things that we care about. And so, it's exciting that people are joining with, I guess, that accessible barrier or at access point that feels accessible or affordable at just $5. But it's giving them an opening to talk and connect with other people that care about similar things. How big does this get? Well, I would love to see 1 million Aussies give $5 a week to raise around $260 million a year. That sounds mad, absolutely, but it's not impossible. And so I think it's good to set our sights high and for that to be the long-term goal, and then to break that down into smaller goals as we grow. And there will be challenges, I'm sure, along the way in terms of how scalable is community? How do you create a really strong sense of people identifying with the community as you grow to that many people? But that's a challenge I think that's worth taking on.
Okay, well, so watch this space. I mean, that's definitely the kind of initiative the government's ready to back. And it really demonstrates the value of combining that community effort and political nous.
Talk about political awareness. Any campaigner worth their salt will need to hone their ability to take part in civil debates. So here's Saffron Zoma from the Australian Democracy Network.
As not-for-profits, we speak for and from communities that otherwise don't necessarily have access to public debates. And that's really important because in a healthy democracy, you want really robust pluralistic debates where different perspectives on issues can be heard and taken into account. And for many communities, the organisations that communities create to be their representatives are the way that they get to be part of those debates. So we think that's a really critical function for democracy, but also for policy outcomes, because people from the community know what the community needs. They have on the ground experience. Many of our organisations are serving these communities in all kinds of different ways. And if those perspectives don't get to be part of making policy, you just won't get as good an outcome. So we think that's a really critical function. The second way that our organisations build democracy is that they can hold the government of the day to account. So, you know, if the government puts in a 500-page omnibus bill that has impacts on our lives, most of us are not going to have the capacity to read and understand what's just been done. The mission of our organisations is to be the experts that can tell us this is what just happened and this is what it's going to mean for your life. And so if we're not happy with it, we can then activate our communities to get a better outcome. So that translation and accountability piece is really important as well. And then I think the final piece is that for many of us, our not-for-profit organisations, be that, you know, our sporting club or the place we volunteer or a faith-based organisation, any of those places, they are where we go to learn civic skills. That's how we become part of public life. And if we are worried about social cohesion more broadly, which I think many of us are and should be, this is absolutely critical because we need to really rebuild the kind of public notion of civic participation and the broad-based skills to be public citizens. And not-for-profit organisations are a primary place where that happens.
As Saffron says, charities and not-for-profits are at the centre of advocacy in this country. And you can read more in our special CDI edition if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that.
A lot of people will be not aware of this one, but sometimes campaigns work just through sheer force of numbers, as in the case of Australia's community legal centres. That campaign involved scores of representatives descending on Canberra for a better funding deal, arguing directly with politicians alongside socials, websites, creating a coalition and more. Here's a rep, Alia Fleming, on Breakfast Television.
Now, up to 1,000 Australians are being left with nowhere to turn because of a funding crisis affecting frontline community legal, domestic and family violence services. Community Legal Centres Australia is launching a new campaign to help get the backing the sector really, in fact, desperately needs. Chairperson Alia Fleming joins us now from Canberra. Alia, very good morning to you.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
How dire are the straits these community legal centres find themselves in at the moment?
Yeah, it's incredibly dire. As you said, we're turning away 1,000 people a day. For every person that we help, that means 2 people are turned away. And our services are so overburdened. Our staff are close to burnout. We struggle to recruit people. And particularly in rural, regional, remote and very remote areas, it is incredibly hard for communities to access legal assistance.
How did we get here?
We got here because there is a current national partnership agreement that is due to expire on the 30th of June 2025. And at the moment, we have less than 9 months funding security. So it is very difficult for centres to offer job security to their staff. And we haven't had a real increase in funding over the life of that agreement. Right. We'd really like to see some leadership from the Commonwealth Government to ensure that that partnership agreement does get signed off by the end of the year.
Yeah, look, soon after that went to air, the Albanese government announced billions more in funding, largely targeted to domestic violence action, which didn't really address all of their concerns, and they're expected to continue this campaign to fight for a better deal that has to be done by the end of the year. As with that campaign, effective campaigns often rely on professionals, whether paid or not paid. We profiled the work of Feature Communications, which is revamping one of Australia's longest running not-for-profit campaigns, Clean Up Australia Day. They've been shortlisted in the Golden Target Awards for Best Not-for-Profit Campaign. Now, in the bottom corner there, you also see that we're promoting the Pro Bono for Purpose offer from a PR agency called MediaCast. It's offering grants of a total of 30 grand to help causes make their case with some PR support. It's very competitive though, so warning, they had 140 applications last year, but only 4 of those went through. But you'd have heard it here. Put in your applications. Closes at the end of November. Another campaign that I wanted to mention was this one, which soft launched this week from MICA Australia and the Australian Council for International Development, with the help again of a not-for-profit for a full-purpose agency, Integrity. We'll just let them explain.
The world feels chaotic right now.
Civilians were killed on Thursday.
At least 4 people have been killed. The UN warns of a growing risk of famine.
As global need increases and people just like us are in need of help, Australia is giving less. In fact, our aid budget has been shrinking for years. Only 0.68% of our federal budget goes towards Australian aid.
Wait, really?
For international money.
It's so low.
It just doesn't feel very Australian. But you can help change that. You can tell your MP that it's time to support our Pacific neighbours as rising seas threaten their homes. It's time to be there for the 1 in 5 children living in conflict zones. It's time to help feed the 700 million people facing hunger. It's time for Down Under to step up. Visit saferworld.org.au and show you support a more Aussie aid budget today.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty slick call to action, and I expect we'll hear more about that in the lead up to the federal elections. Look, we're kind of running out of time. We obviously politicians. What do you do? But look, let's just jump straight to our top stories. I thought we'd just flick through a couple of our big yarns that we might be interested in. That's slide number 6, Lockie.
So the 3 stories for the community advocate that would cover a lot of news between Matt and myself, but one was the launch of the Community Compass report, which hopefully a lot of you would have seen. It was groundbreaking research that shines a light on Australians' attitude to community groups and their vital role in the social fabric of the nation, and it was genuinely interesting, compelling information that was brought to light. There was the Berg Synthesis report. Senator Smith touched on it, one of the big rock inquiries that are undergoing. I think it was a must-read report because it provides a comprehensive sense check on the issues that matter to charities and not-for-profits in Australia, even if they have been prosecuted before, but there was a lot, it brought it all together in one place. And 50 years community radio, broadcasting now, but originally radio. It was a celebration of the amazing story of community broadcasting's birthplace 50 years ago, and the eclectic mix of passionate people that worked hard to bring that to life, which is an amazing story.
Yeah.
Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, look, also in the Community Directors Intelligence, if you don't already get it, obviously we keep talking about the campaigns edition. Many of the organisations featured today are in there. There's some great advice as well about how you wrangle the tricky business of activism in your workplace. That's from our Executive Director, Adele Stolinda. And we've got great campaigning tips in there. We spoke to one of our ICDA students about his involvement in the Community Legal Centre's work. There's another edition there that you'd be interested in about money. Everyone's always interested in where the money's coming from. We're talking about lots of innovative funding opportunities, and the next edition's coming out soon in the next couple of weeks, and that will be on HR workplace issues. There are many issues, I tell you that. So look, if you're not already subscribed to our newsletters, there are some QR codes. We'll send you those later. Did I say that it's all free?
I didn't, but you can never say that enough times, can you? Yeah.
We're on socials as well, so check out some of those. There's plenty of links to follow. So if you want to follow us in between our newsletters, there's plenty of those, and you can see some of the hot topics there. They're not always what you expect, but there they all are. And let me see. I think that's all we've got time.
We've run out of time, unfortunately.
Thank you, Lockie, for all the tech support. Everyone else, we hope you've enjoyed the not-for-profit agenda. We've got a survey here.
Yes.
We've got a survey here. Don't forget that we're going to be sending out the slides with links to all the stuff we've talked about today. Thank you very much again. And we'll see you early next year.
Next time, yeah. Thanks heaps for joining us. It's always a pleasure, and enjoy the rest of your day.
I think I might need to get a beer or something.
I think we might need to,
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.